Hello, welcome to another edition of a hallway hangout. This one is focused on WordPress 6.3 performance improvements. So if you're looking for something else, this is the wrong video. We're gathered on July, what is the date? 27th, 2023. So the release comes out in just under 2 weeks. So this is a look at what's to come. So hopefully this gets you all excited about what we're working on. We have both of the performance leads here. I'm admitting one more person. And we have a loose agenda. So hallway hangouts are intended to be casual and collaborative. So turn your camera off, come and go as you'd like. They're not meant to be super structured, but we do, compared to other hallway hangouts, have a bit of an agenda to go through and some information to share with you. So once we get through those things and some already set questions, we can dive into kind of an open discussion. But to start, I wanted to do some intros. So I'm going to add what I'd love to hear from folks. And you don't have to share if you don't want to. If you'd prefer to type in the chat or say nothing at all, you're welcome to do that as well. But just name, location, how you contribute to WordPress. Yeah, I'll kick it off. So I'm Ann McCarthy, maybe who you're sponsored by if you're a sponsored contributor. I'm sponsored by Automatic. I am in Seattle, Washington, USA. And I contribute to WordPress in a variety of ways. I mainly run the full site outreach program, but also contribute to a variety of teams, including core editor, accessibility, and so on, testing. I will pass it off to Emily.
Thank you. So I'm Emily. I'm based in Manchester in the UK. I've sponsored through 10up and through Google. I've been working on the performance team for quite a bit over a year now, about 18 months, I think, working closely with Felix and Joe, Adam, Mukesh, quite a lot of people on here. I'm very recently been in the position of the team rep role on the performance team. So I run the weekly Slack and basically act as like the project coordinator or program manager for the work that we have lined up in the roadmap for the performance team. So trying to coordinate all the different moving pieces, working on with Felix on the performance lead role for 6.3, and then also planning to do that for 6.4. So I'm trying to learn the ropes from him. So yeah, that's generally me. I will maybe let someone volunteer in case someone doesn't want to jump in. So
yeah, feel free to raise your hand if you want to go, and I'll call on you.
Sure, I'll go. I'll I beat you, Felix, by a millisecond. Adam Silverstein. I'm in rural Western Colorado. I contribute mainly, I guess, to media and revisions, but I've been involved in a whole bunch of different things in core and performance most recently.
Very cool. Felix, did you raise your hand too?
Yeah, I'm Felix Arns, based in San Francisco, California. I'm sponsored by Google and have been contributing to WordPress for many years, mostly on the core side. I have been doing also contributions in other areas over the years, but mostly on the core side. And now, for essentially since its beginning, the performance team primarily.
You were our very first performance lead, so thank you for that. Joe, you jump in next.
Hello, Joe McGill. I'm located in St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. I have been a contributor to WordPress for a bunch of years. I think somewhere between 2014 and 2016 is when I got involved. Primarily working on performance issues around media originally. Started working with the performance team here in around January when I joined 10up in a sponsored role, where I get to work with all these fabulous people, focused on just performance mainly. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Mukesh, hopefully I said that correctly.
Hello everyone, I am Mukesh Panchal, based in Gujarat, India. Senior web developer at 10up. Primarily, I am focusing on core and performance. I am also a code triage lead for the 6.3. That's me.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
We have a couple of release squad members here. Simon, will you go next?
Hey, Anne. Hey guys, Simon Dowdles, based in Cape Town, South Africa. Also work at 10up, so essentially sponsored by 10up, working on the performance team as well and contributing mainly in the performance space at the moment and on the performance plugin.
Awesome. Let's do Andre. Let's see you next.
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm based on Galicia, Spain. I contribute mostly to the core editor team, though I've also sent some contributions to performance in the last 2 releases.
Boom. Awesome. If anyone else wants to introduce themselves. Karthik.
Hi, I'm Karthik, based in Dublin, Ireland, and I represent 10up and Google. So I've been working with performance team for past, like I would say, 8 months. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Very cool. We got a nice range of folks. This is great. Let's dive in at this point. Emily and Felix have been working on a great analysis going through the 6.3 improvements, both for just dev note purposes and also I'll call out Felix is doing a lot of really nerdy beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 like check-ins, which is awesome and exactly what I'm excited to see. I definitely have been checking Slack for those after you sent me a couple of those, but I will hand it off to you all to dive in to the 6.3 performance improvements.
Thank you. I don't know if you, Felix, you want to go through the documents that you had.
Sorry, which? Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure where we want to start. On the 6. Are you speaking about the 6.3 performance improvements post or?
Yep, we could start there. Definitely. I think that might be nice to just
mean,
summarize where we're at.
Yeah. So yeah, Emily and I have been working on a post to summarize the highlights of the performance landings in 6.3. So similar to the post that you wrote and for 6.2. And I think that post, we're probably going to share it for further review today. It's in a Google Doc right now. We've focused on highlighting the overall improvements, which so far it's fair to say that they have been even better than WordPress 6.2, which is really amazing. So I think we outdid ourselves on the block theme side, even more LCP improvement. But now, particularly on the classic theme side, is also almost at the same level now, where before classic themes had like 5% improvement and block themes like 15 to 20. So it's great that we were able to got some landings in this release that benefited both equally. Because it was in fact a few things that really affected both the performance of both types of themes. So yeah, we've been focusing on that in the post, and then starting to kind of from there go highlight a few tickets that were particularly impactful in that, and we kind of went from there. So mostly focused on the actual performance improvements, like how tickets actually directly improve performance in the release. Of course, there are some things that are performance related that were landed in this release, like this ability to mark scripts as defer async. At the same time, that ticket, for example, is an example. It would not have an impact on performance right away because it's just an API that first has to be adopted by the ecosystem to make an impact. So for this type of ticket, we also wanted to call out in the post, but not in the same group with the other ones, basically. And we had, just for context, hopefully most people here saw that, but we had a call for topics or call for tickets essentially before we wrote this post. Like we asked in a few channels for people to share tickets that they would like to see highlighted in the performance post. So that's where we are with that.
Do you want to go through any of the image performance enhancements? Because I know that was another thing that came up in the dev note.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
I can share my.
let me just pull up that article. Yeah, share it here. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we had so I think the primary image enhancement that's part of 6.3 is the fetch priority support for images, which essentially allows to mark the most important image on the page. And when I say most important, it's not necessarily what you want to be the most important. Like it has to be the image that is the largest in the viewport, which I would also assess from like a content editorial experience. You probably want that image to be the most important image anyway. But that's basically where the user's attention goes to, and it is what primarily affects the LCP metric. So LCP, or largest contentful paint, is basically the overarching Core Web Vitals performance metric that captures overall load time performance. And overall load time performance is really focused on load time performance of what the user actually sees. Like LCP does not care if like the last image at the bottom of the page is loaded. You could argue that is when the entire page is loaded, but nobody cares about this because the user doesn't see what's at the bottom of the page. So LCP really tries to capture the load time performance in the way that it affects the user. So LCP is based on the largest content element on the page, which is not always an image, but is often an image. And marking such that image with fetch priority high, with this attribute fetch priority high, allows the browser to basically know that it's the most important image even before the browser can compute the layout of the page, which allows it to download the image earlier, and overall can improve load time by 5 to 10% based on our benchmarks that we did before implementing this feature.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for going through that. That was one I wanted to call out. I also, Andre, I know you had a question on the post. Let me pull it up. And I don't know if you all are up for digging into. Oh, thanks for sharing these two. Do you want to go through those, Emily, at all? For the async and defer
As a
attributes?
non-engineer, it's probably difficult for me to go through that one, but I can certainly defer to other folks for that. I know, Joe McGill, you were very heavily involved in this one, and Simon Dowdles, you were very heavily involved in this one. This is quite a long-standing issue that we managed to resolve. I know there's some follow-up work to do there about applying it, but there's certainly some more work to do. But there's a large portion of the blog post just referring to this one. So technically, I may refer to my colleagues, Joe and Simon, if you have anything further to add. But this was what we were talking about with the async and defer attributes.
Simon, do you want to share anything from the post you wrote?
Yeah, I think it's overall this is received. It's So to Felix's point, I believe this track ticket is almost 13 years old. That's how old it is. So the ask has been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
14. 14. Well, there we go. Even older than I thought. So yes, it'll make a lot of people happy. It'll make a lot of happy people, and most importantly, we can undo a lot of the more hacky approaches that we've outlined in the post that are probably scattered all over the web. So we chose to implement this in a manner that's really accessible and simple by the WP script API, so through register script and onQ script, making it super easy to adopt. So really no excuse to do the more hacky means. At the same time, we had to do a lot of work to ensure that the script's trees remain intact with dependents and dependencies. So that was quite a large portion of work that we went back and forth on, to ensure that certain dependents and dependencies don't break one another because of async and defer, blocking, etc. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton more to say on it other than, happy to see it in, and it was a long road. Joe, anything specific you want? I will say that we did have, I don't think it's mentioned in this blog post. We do have a track ticket to follow up on this to hopefully implement deferred inline scripts as well, which was quite a challenge while undergoing this body of work. So yeah, Joe, anything you want to add specifically about this?
I think the only thing that I would really add is having this a part of the core APIs that are used for registering scripts now opens up the opportunity that we've never had before in the core application to better manage the way that we load the JavaScript that WordPress provides, right? So, even though in plugin land and in theme land, people have been hacking around the fact that we didn't support this officially via first party API means in order to better load JavaScript on their pages. It's not something that WordPress has ever done with the JavaScript that we bundle for blocks, for even like old versions of jQuery or whatever other things. And so now we have the opportunity, just including this by itself doesn't actually cause any performance improvements, but it creates the opportunity now for us to really improve the way the JavaScript loads really at scale across the web. Anybody who's using WordPress and not using some of those optimization plugins or those sorts of things. So I'm excited to see how this how we actually take advantage of this in upcoming releases, particularly around the front end scripts that we register and we enqueue for blocks and that sort of thing. And I know that's something that Weston has started to look into, and there are a couple of track tickets and Gutenberg tickets related to this. But to me, that's the thing that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, that's a great call, Felix.
Yeah, just to add to that, I believe that first PR of Weston was actually already merged in Gutenberg, which is about the deferring block JavaScript, which it was actually reasonable to defer all scripts that any block enqueues based on how they're already loaded in somewhat unpredictable places. So there isn't really a risk of. There wasn't really a risk of breaking changes because they're already maybe loaded in header or footer. So it's now already today you have to take care of that as a developer, that your scripts work either way. So from that perspective, adding defer was even generally, not only to specific block scripts, was a reasonable change. So that's then hopefully something that will be part of 6.4 eventually. And just one more general thing I wanted to add to Simon shared something about the dependencies and dependence and how that is handled by the core API. I just want to give a bit more context on that. When this new API was implemented, something that was really important is we wanted to think about how can this be adopted in the ecosystem without breakage. So with all those for example, if a very large plugin, for example, wants to adopt this API, and then we all know massive some of the very big plugins, they have extensions. They might have their own ecosystem of other plugins. And in order for such plugins to adopt it, we had to implement this in a way that their extensions won't break, for example, if they adopt the API, but then their extensions don't yet. So basically, the load time order of different JavaScript files, it matters. And if, for example, a script that is depended on by other scripts is now loaded later, it would break. So the way that you provide that, the way when one, I feel maybe I don't want to go too much into the details here, but if you adopt this in your plugin, even if another plugin depends on your script, it won't break, because WordPress core, if it sees that there's a dependent on your script, it will reset your script to the more conservative strategy, and that way it will not break. But as soon as then the other plugin also updates to use this new API, then both of the scripts would be loaded in the new way, and that way it would work. And so there wouldn't be any intermediate breakage. And that was really important to get this feature into Core.
That's a very good call out for anyone watching who's a plugin author. I love that. Let me open up. This is like the other GitHub ticket you all were referencing. No, this is great. Very cool. Are we okay with switching focuses to Andre? I don't know if you wanted to dig into this on the call, but it seemed like a good question to bring up and to discuss. And Felix, not to make you talk more, but I know you responded with some great data. Yeah, Andre, I don't know if you want to touch on this.
I saw that Felix share some analysis he did. So perhaps I will leave him to explain the data that he dig into the cruise data set.
Yeah, so based on this question, which was a really good call, we hadn't really looked much specifically into the field impact of 6.2, so basically I dug into the numbers on the Chrome user experience report, which is public data. I just shared here in the chat this collab where I captured all the numbers with it's essentially BigQuery queries, which you could run yourself to validate this. So there's when you scroll down, it has the full queries, but also, and below them is always the data of that we actually care about. So I got a bit of data here. For example, this is the data for all WordPress sites that were this is the data for all WordPress sites in February this year compared to June this year, and there you can see that, for example, LCP passing rate has improved by something like 3%. TTFB has improved by something like 6% on like comparing the desktop numbers. So, and then I went a bit more in detail because this was a comparison of all WordPress sites that exist. Of course, not all of these WordPress sites are actually on 6.1 or 6.2. So then the next query I did was to take only the sites that were on I actually took only the sites that were on 6.1 in February, which was the month before 6.3 was released, 6.2 was released. And then compared it with all the sites that were on 6.2 in June, which is essentially, and the reason I did that was to get a roughly equivalent data set size because it was the same distance of month from the actual release of the WordPress version. And yeah, I can say it's extremely challenging to draw direct conclusions or direct causation between what we landed in WordPress core. And here, like, for example, our core lab benchmarks, they said that block themes would improve by, LCP would improve by like 18% and core and classic themes by 5%. It's reasonable to expect that in the field, the improvements will not be that high because, of course, actual sites, they use much more than just WordPress core. They use tons of plugins and who knows how, like, which theme. So we can't just assume that the same thing is going to happen in the field that we measure in just core. But it's good that these numbers do actually show. Feel free to take a closer look later. Yeah, I also summarized my observations there. There's definitely a tendency that validates what we had seen in the lab benchmarks. Particularly also the last query I did that was for sites, only the sites that use a block theme. And the improvements there, particularly on time to first byte, were higher than all the other improvements, which also makes sense given our benchmarks because the highest benefits overall that we measured in lab benchmarks in 6.2 were on server-side performance of block themes. So all that, at least I would say, it validates the lab benchmarks. It's very hard to say how much core, in fact, improved performance in that sense, but I think the fact that the tendencies are all kind of validating what we had measured, we can certainly say it did improve at all.
One other thing I was going to say that we can look at in the field data, like after the release goes out, is like a lot of the work was around the accuracy of the lazy loading attribute and where we're applying that. So that is something we can see in the field data, is how frequently are WordPress sites correctly labeling the LCP image with the fetch priority and not putting the lazy loading attribute on it. So that was like one of the big goals with a lot of the changes. And that's actually, it's not like a direct measure of the performance, but it's a measure of sort of the success of our effort. And directly correlates to performance improvements.
I did actually do an analysis in the field for block themes. You know, so Adam raised a good point. Like, that's going to be relevant after the 6.3 release. We can of course measure specifically what the impact of fetch priority is. That's one thing. That's a thing with Chrome, with the Chrome UX report, is that it captures core web vitals, which is really affected by everything on the WordPress site. But there are other ways that we can measure the impact of a change in core that is more specific. For example, with this lazy loading example, we know there are some problems where the LCP image may be lazy loaded, but it shouldn't be. So when we land improvements there, we can check what percentage of sites do lazy load the LCP image, and we expect this to go down but we expect that percentage to drop after the new release. So that is a metric, and that is a metric that is much more reliable because it's just has a lot fewer aspects in form affecting it. In fact, I did an analysis on our site where I looked at that for WordPress 6.2 only for block themes, because in 6.2 already we landed a fix for block themes lazy loading specifically, and I can just share the number. Like, basically there we were able to observe that actually on all block theme sites in the field, the percentage of sites that had the LCP image lazy loaded dropped from 36% to 16%. So that was definitely something where we could say, okay, this improvement was successful. It didn't fix everything, but it definitely reduced the number a lot. Andre, I think you had some more specific follow-up questions to the Crux data.
Yeah, I looked through your report, and the TLDR for me is that somehow it validates our lab assumptions, which is good. Obviously, the numbers are not as good as we expected because there are other factors, right? So, and then I looked to the Core Web Vitals report, and if I read in this correctly, yes, looking at TTFB here, since April, and April means end of the month, I think that was one of my questions. So since April, which is like the first month with 6.2 in the field, since April we've seen like an increase, like 1.5 increase in improvements to TTFB. So which makes me optimistic. Like we cannot say is WordPress, because could be just, you know, hosts updating the PHP version. It could be just that. But the fact that is, you know, consistent through April, May, and June makes me more optimistic. So yeah.
Where do you see that? Is that the whole?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, but
no, but I would change. Yeah, I would change to the, because this is the Core Web Vitals. I would change to the TTFB. I don't know if.
Yeah, and if you go to
you have to click the little filter icon.
If you go to this little icon right above the chart, right above the chart, there's
right
these
here.
4 little icons. No, even below that, there's these 4 little icons on the right. And then this
That's
one,
it.
yeah, the metrics, yeah, this one. I think you just can change
exactly. Yeah.
There we go.
And
Thank
if you go to April.
Why doesn't it show? I guess I can scroll down. It's probably easier. Here, are you talking about 2023? Hold on.
Yeah, that works as well.
Well, that's one data point, which is annoying.
Oh, but this is showing data from the previous report, so it's not the.
Let me pull up.
This
Let's
one
show
still
it
shows.
again. Yeah, I don't know how to get it to. If I click on it, it'll.
Yeah, if
maybe
you
if
select
you-
the chart.
Maybe if you hover
maybe.
over the line of in the chart, it
Yeah,
might.
yeah, that's it.
There we go.
That's,
Okay.
So from that month on, we have been increasing at first almost 2 points and then almost 1.5, which is the first time that happens in this data set. Like,
That's true.
you know, the consistency, I mean. So I would expect that the same thing would happen in July and August, though lower, because there are less sites to update to 6.2. I think now we are at 65% of sites using 6.2 already. So the ratio of improvement would be lower. That would confirm that this is showing us the improvements on the WordPress base. And then on September, October, we will see the 6.3 improvements, which I suppose that would be bigger, and also be showing the other thing, the other LCP metric, which for now doesn't, it didn't impact the 6.2 release, didn't impact too much of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because my analysis was really only comparing 6.2 to 6.1. So without another reference point, it's also hard to say like how high is that improvement. But indeed, when you look at this chart, it's quite obvious how at the end it really goes up. So that's a great point.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. That's cool.
Like though in my data it just says something like 1+%, the fact that this the fact that before it was even less, so that shows basically that we're going in the right direction. I think you had a question on Slack about the data set. This is always a bit of a limitation with Crux and HTTP Archive. Both basically HTTP Archive, just I can give a bit of context. Crux is based on the user like opt-in user reported data from all Chrome users, and from that it gets Core Web Vitals data. HTTP Archive is a completely separate project which queries the web every month. Then it has a very large data set of, I don't know, probably 20 million sites or something, and it queries the web. That HTTP Archive itself has nothing to do with Core Web Vitals. It's literally just querying all the content of the web and detecting certain things. There's in fact like a project on GitHub for it there, where we recently added this detection to capture whether a site is using a block theme, for example. That's something that we added a few months ago to that HTTP Archive detection. And then in order to get this data that I used in the analysis, you have to, and also in order to get the data used in the CWD tech report, you have to join data from HTTP Archive with Crux, because the Crux data does not have any information whether a site is a WordPress site, for example. And so the data is always not 100% trustworthy, because it's always for an entire month. So Crux contains essentially performance data for an entire month, which means and of course sites do not always update their WordPress version on the first of the month, which means that if the site updates in the middle of let's say if all sites were to update at the middle of the month, then that month's data would be basically 50% for the one version, 50% for the other version. So there's always some part of it that's not 100% accurate, and it's impossible really based on that data to get accurate numbers, but in general it's more about seeing tendencies, right? Because overall more and more sites will be on 6.2, and we definitely can at least segment the results by specific WordPress versions. But again, for every site, for example, if you filter sites by 6.2, whatever the first month was where they changed to 6.2, it will still have probably some data in there that was from 6.1, because at the first of the month they were still using 6.1. So that's just for context.
I just a little bit more context to add to that is that the data in Crux is aggregated at the origin level. So what we get is kind of like an aggregate of how well does this entire website do, and it's also not weighted by the number of like navigations or pages on a particular site. So you might have some sites in the data set that have a huge number of pages and page views. Those are weighted equally to sites that have almost none. And then the one final point is that all the data it's only collected for sites where there's enough traffic that it can be anonymized. So it has to be a significant amount of traffic to the site. So very small sites are sort of excluded by that definition from the data set.
My notes are wild for this. This is very helpful, but yeah, thank you for the links. I did want to move into, I'm curious if there's anything, yeah, thank you all for, I love a good link. So we can dig in and others can as well. I wanted to make sure we had time for any open discussions because I know there were some items already raised before and we have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to keep this at an hour tops. So I know one was what we discussed, the TTFB impact from 6.2, if I'm not mistaken. I think that is covered. And then I know, I can't remember who brought it up, but talking about the impact of late merges of PHP features to core. If someone wants to dive in and talk about that there, I know there's like a lot of thoughts on both the core editor and core side. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'm happy to at least frame the beginning of that conversation. And I think most of the people on this call that have been participating in sort of the performance work we've been doing primarily have been focused for the last couple of releases on evaluating the current state of the previous WordPress version, right? Getting an observation of where there are opportunities for improvement, trying during the next release cycle to make those improvements, and then being able to validate that the improvements that we worked on actually had the impact that we wanted them to have. Rinse, recycle, repeat, however you want to say that. However, at the same time, particularly as we're entering the next phase of the larger WordPress project to add new functionality, I want to make sure that we're thinking well about how we are not just sort of reactive to let's look at the current state that we're in and try to improve it, but like how do we also make sure that the incoming work, the improvements that are happening that are not particularly performance focused, continue to like help us move forward in making WordPress more performant for end users. And I know like Andre has done great work over the last couple of releases on specific performance issues focused on the Gutenberg project. But there still like have been things like the duotone functionality that came in late to core, where it feels like because the people who are working on those features don't have the same sort of experience and focus on performance from a PHP code writing point of view, things get merged late into WordPress releases that have a negative performance impact that then we like notice after, because of our measurements after the fact, and then have to like react to try to help improve things. And I just wanted to like talk about it. Are there better ways that we could be working collaboratively or have folks embedded earlier in some of those projects, or flag things earlier in a development process, so that the people who are working on particularly the new exciting things that are coming into WordPress get the same sort of care and attention as as we would like them to get upfront.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is there is a label for needing PHP backports to core. So I wonder if looking through that label on Gutenberg might help, but it does come late in the cycle sometimes. And I think you're onto something, especially thinking about phase 3 and collaboration and how there can be early involvement there. Because what you're describing, that's really helpful to have that context of this is what the performance team is looking at. It's like prior WordPress release, comparing, figuring out gaps and moving forward. And some of this like brand new functionality that's being built could pretty easily get missed. I know for 6.4 and something that's being discussed is like it is a shorter release cycle. So some of this stuff could be good to implement and to experiment with. And Emily and I are both on the release squad. So I feel like we're already in touch where we can kind of see if there's some better ways to do it in terms of handling some of those backports. And yeah, I just think having a condensed release could make it a bit easier. There's less changes running around to handle, and we can kind of iterate on that. That's like the first thing that comes to mind is something to have a specific focus on. But yeah, I'm curious to hear from others. And I also want to drop, not to get too into the weeds, but like this could be an interesting example. Riyadh posted a great post on, I could just share it, couldn't I? On this, which is, sorry, let me scroll back up, on real-time collaboration architecture, which I quickly pulled up just to check to see if performance was mentioned. Excuse all my tabs, but looking at this in terms of, this is like early work in terms of the architecture and getting the performance team involved in these discussions. And Matthias has posted a ton of phase 3 related posts. They're all early stages, and something that's on my mind just at a higher level is around similar to how we have like a full siting outreach program. Like, what does outreach look like for phase 3? I don't know. I am doing some early outreach to plugin authors and various folks who were impacted by those changes, but I think that's something we can do more of, specifically in partnership with the performance team, since a lot of this stuff is very technical, and I could see a good collaboration there.
Yeah, one of the other things that I'm curious about is I know you know, the versions of the Gutenberg project, you know, that are being released as a plugin are already several versions ahead of what was included in, or what will be included, I guess, in the 6.3 release that is going to come out in a couple weeks. And I'm wondering, can we go ahead and start to do those package updates more frequently during this release, earlier in the process, so that there's at least a base of the things that have already been merged into the Gutenberg project over, you know, the 3 or 4 releases that have happened post the version that, you know, is being included in this like core release, just so that that PHP code and some of those features are kind of soaking in trunk a little bit longer. We have the opportunity to you know, observe them, review them, pick out things that may have problems, and that may be one thing that could help.
Yeah, I think that'd be huge. I know Tonya Mork, who is also, for transparency, an automatic sponsored contributor, often works on the core side, and that is part of her dedicated role, is to bridge that gap, particularly with backports.
Okay.
So that might actually be, I can't speak to her collaboration with the performance team, but that might actually be a good person to ping and specifically have a conversation with. I know she's joined some Hangouts in the past, but yeah, her team and her kind of scope of work is around improving that flow and making things a bit easier. But yeah, I think that came up actually, now that I'm remembering it, on the 6.4 release leads call, like an early part of the early discussion. So I know that's on the mind of the 6.4 release squad. But I agree. I think it'd be awesome. I think everyone wants that. Like, I think it's a pain for folks who are doing the backports, who have to go back through and look at code they committed a long time ago and figure out what needs to be done. I think it's just not fun for anyone. So, Andre, I don't know if you have anything to add there. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
yeah, I haven't been involved in the. You know, I know that one of the struggles to make backport like once a month or once every 2 Gutenberg releases is time. You know, it still takes time to do the PHP backports. I mean, timing, like there is no enough reviewers, there is not enough people that has commit access, so that's the blocker. That's as far as I know. As long as we solve that, I think we could improve the velocity. I think there was some experiment that when we tried to backport things earlier, but it just didn't work. But I know Tony is looking into that, and others might know a bit more about this.
Yeah, I'll ping Tonya to follow up there. But yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I wonder if there's I mean, I think the topic has come up before, and I understand there's a lot of time time needed for it, and and it's not exactly fun to do it. Like, I wonder if there is a way to get to a point where we have one additional merge. Like, it doesn't have to be every month or every 2 weeks or something, by no means, but maybe one additional sort of midpoint. And I wonder if we can come up with some workflow that we embed, which really is a workflow for both sides of Core and Gutenberg to collaborate. Like, maybe something more formal, like in the kind of like how we have the release, we have release party chats, right? Like, I wonder if there is a format in which we can do the backport party chat or whatever at the middle of the release cycle, something like that, so that it's yeah, so that to make sure it's more on people's minds, because I think a lot of as far as I know, I think it's very much just stuck with the primary Gutenberg contributors, and I think it would be great maybe then to diversify who has to work on this, and maybe having some actual format that is more broadly shared with the overall core developer community would facilitate that, would also reduce some of those blockers, like having not enough reviewers and all that. So I don't know if maybe that's something that we can make a bigger thing than it is right now, and also promote more, which so that other people are aware that they can help and are asked to help and all that. Separately, I don't want to say this all has to but I guess my point is it really shouldn't be only on the Gutenberg contributors to backport the stuff. So I really want to make sure that we can find ways for the people that work primarily outside of Gutenberg to help with the backports. And yeah, separately, I'm also always curious if there is ways for the core side to be more involved when the things are getting into Gutenberg, which I think it's very difficult because the velocity is different, and it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. So it's harder to follow necessarily what needs priority review versus not. But I just want to call that out. I feel I think it's really important that we yeah, try to find a way that both sides are happy, really. I don't want to say we should just backport regularly, because that it also sounds infeasible.
I'm all about practical in between.
Yeah, I agree to that. And also going back to what Joel said at the beginning, I really like that, there is now a document that someone went through WordPress systems and say, well, these are processes that are expensive. Recently there was a post about internationalization, right? So we should look into that. So being intentional about the performance we need to fix, I think is gonna be the thing that makes the needles up, right? On the other hand, there's going to be always reactive work, right? Like there's this new feature and we need to make sure there's performance. That's always going to be there. For that, we have code the vitals, and we can see the impact of PRs, specific PRs, and if they have a big impact, we can look into them. Also, there are code vitals for Gutenberg, so we don't need to wait until something is in trunk for looking for for reviewing its performance. So that's something that we can do, though it would be ideal that backports are just immediate.
Can I ask, is there a group or a team within embedded in the Gutenberg project that is focused on performance, or has it sort of been an ad hoc focus from time to time, or what? I just wonder if there's the potential for a focus area for contributors there that can collaborate, directly with folks.
Yeah, as far as I know, there is no formal group for performance within the Core Editor group, though there are some folks that are performance minded. Riyadh is one of them, and he built the dashboards that we have. There are other couple of folks that, depending on what they are working on, they might spend some time looking into performance. So yeah, it's just person to person.
I do want to call you out on that too, because you are one of those folks, Andre. You conveniently left yourself off, but yeah, you're definitely one of the folks. Yeah, this is good. I will, in the summary of the notes, which I think one of the hallway hangouts led to a discussion about performance leads. So I will propose this as a follow-up and try to track it down and talk to Tonya, who I think is on the 6.4 release squad. I could be wrong. But that's something that we can kick off for 6.4 and just kind of throw it out there. I like the idea of just like one more like one moment, make it a release party, make it known. I like that idea. I think that could be a good thing to try and experiment with. And like I said, this release is inherently on a tighter timeline and will likely have less, not less, but just different timeline to cram stuff in. So I think that'd be a really good next step. Because yeah, I think we get stuck when it's like, we need to be continually doing this and the conversation dies. So folks, I think it's a really good call. And Tonya is very much dedicated and can speak to it with a lot more nuance than I can in terms of additional blockers. But I think Andre is right in terms of time and capacity to do it. So I think making it something that's a group effort that people could jump in on would be huge. We have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes left. I just want to be cognizant of time and see if any folks had any other ideas or just questions or things they wanted to throw out at the end. Otherwise, we can stare at each other, which is always fun. Cool. All right. Let's wrap up. I would prefer to give you all a little bit of time back, but thank you all so much for joining and for sharing so generously and kind of, I know these topics can be intense and heated and technical. And so I feel like this is a really good peek at kind of how WordPress folks collaborate and contribute. So I hope this is for anyone watching who wants to join into the performance efforts. These are the folks that you probably work with. So very friendly, smart group who's just trying to help the web be faster and better for everyone. So thank you so much for joining. I will post the notes as part of the same post that was originally in the hallway hangout, just to make it easy to find. And I'll drop a link into WordPress Slack to summarize. But thank you again, and let's see what we can do in 6.4.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.